It was a cold, rainy evening. The streets were nearly empty, with only the sound of raindrops hitting the pavement breaking the silence. A police officer was driving slowly through the neighborhood, his windshield wipers working hard to keep up with the downpour. He was on his usual patrol, keeping an eye out for anything unusual. But tonight, something caught his attention. Through the rain-soaked window, he spotted a small figure walking alone on the sidewalk. It was a little girl, no older than 6 or 7, dressed in a thin, soaked jacket. She was barefoot, her tiny feet splashing in the puddles as she walked. The officer's heart sank. What was a child doing out in this weather, all by herself? He pulled his car over and stepped out, his boots splashing in the water. The little girl didn't seem to notice him at first. She was staring straight ahead, her face pale and her lips trembling from the cold. The officer approached her slowly, not wanting to scare her. "Hey there," he said softly, crouching down to her level. "Are you okay? What are you doing out here all alone?" The little girl looked up at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. She didn't say anything at first, just shivered and wrapped her arms around herself. The officer noticed how thin she was, her clothes hanging loosely on her small frame. He took off his raincoat and gently draped it over her shoulders. "It's okay," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. "I'm here to help. Can you tell me where your parents are?" At the mention of her parents, the girl's lower lip quivered, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. She looked down at her feet, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't have any." The officer's heart ached at her words. He had seen a lot in his years on the force, but something about this little girl broke his heart. He knelt there in the rain, trying to process what she had just said. How could a child so young be out here alone, with no one to care for her? "What do you mean, sweetheart?" he asked gently. "Where do you live?" The girl shook her head, her wet hair clinging to her face. "I don't have a home," she whispered. "I was staying with my grandma, but she went away." The officer's mind raced. He needed to get her out of the rain and somewhere warm, but he also needed to understand her situation. He held out his hand. "Come on, let's get you into the car. We'll figure this out together, okay?" The little girl hesitated for a moment, then slowly reached out and took his hand. Her tiny fingers were ice-cold, and the officer could feel her trembling. He led her to the patrol car and helped her into the back seat, making sure she was comfortable before closing the door. As he got back into the driver's seat, he turned to look at her. "What's your name?" he asked. The girl looked at him for a moment, then whispered, "I don't have one." The officer was stunned. How could a child not have a name? He tried to keep his voice steady. "Everyone has a name, sweetheart. What do people call you?" She shook her head again. "No one calls me anything. I'm just me." The officer felt a lump in his throat. He had no idea what this little girl had been through, but he knew he had to help her. He started the car and began driving toward the station, his mind racing with questions. Who was she? Where did she come from? And why was she all alone in the rain? As they drove, the girl sat quietly in the back seat, staring out the window. The officer glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his heart heavy. He knew he couldn't just drop her off at the station and move on. He had to do something more. When they arrived at the station, the officer got out and opened the door for the girl. She looked up at him with those big, sad eyes, and he felt a surge of protectiveness. He took her hand again and led her inside, where it was warm and dry. The other officers at the station looked up as they walked in, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern. One of them approached. "What's going on?" he asked. The officer explained the situation, his voice low so the girl wouldn't hear. "I found her wandering alone in the rain. She says she doesn't have a home or a name. I don't know what to do." The other officer nodded, his face serious. We'll call child services, but it might take a while for them to get here. In the meantime, let's get her something to eat and some dry clothes." The officer agreed and took the girl to a small room where they kept supplies for situations like this. He found a blanket and wrapped it around her, then handed her a cup of hot chocolate. She held it with both hands, her eyes wide as she took a small sip. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice so soft he almost didn't hear it. The officer smiled, though his heart was still heavy. "You're welcome, sweetheart. We're going to take care of you, okay?" The girl nodded, but she didn't say anything else. She just sat there, sipping her hot chocolate and staring at the floor. The officer sat down across from her, watching her closely. He didn't know what the future held for this little girl, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to let her face it alone. The station was quiet, save for the occasional sound of footsteps or the low hum of voices. The little girl sat curled up in a chair, the blanket wrapped tightly around her. She had finished her hot chocolate, and now she just stared at the floor, her small hands clutching the edges of the blanket. The officer sat nearby, watching her with a mix of concern and curiosity. He wanted to ask her more questions, but he didn't want to overwhelm her. She had already been through so much. After a while, he leaned forward slightly, keeping his voice soft. "Do you remember anything about where you came from? Anything at all?" The girl hesitated, her eyes flickering up to meet his for a brief moment before looking down again. I remember a big house," she said slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "And a garden. There were flowers, yellow ones." The officer nodded, encouraging her to continue. "That's good. Do you remember who lived there with you?" She shook her head, her expression clouded with confusion. "I don't know. I think there was a lady. She used to sing to me. But I can't remember her face." The officer's heart ached at the sadness in her voice. It was clear that her memories were fragmented, like pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notebook, jotting down what she had told him. Even the smallest detail could be important. "What about your grandma?" he asked gently. "You said you were staying with her. Can you tell me about her?" The girl's lower lip trembled, and she looked away. She was nice. She used to make me soup when I was cold. But then she got sick, and," her voice trailed off, and she wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. The officer didn't press her further. He could see that talking about her grandma was painful for her. Instead, he reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze. "It's okay," he said. "You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to." She nodded, but she didn't say anything else. The officer sat back, his mind racing. He needed to find out more about her, but he didn't know where to start. He decided to call the local shelters and foster homes to see if anyone had reported a missing child. Maybe someone was looking for her. As he made the calls, the girl sat quietly, her eyes drifting around the room. She seemed curious but also wary, as if she wasn't sure whether she could trust the people around her. The officer noticed this and made a mental note to keep an eye on her. He didn't want her to feel scared or alone. After a while, one of the other officers approached with a plate of food. "Here," he said, setting it down in front of the girl. "You must be hungry." The girl looked at the plate, her eyes widening at the sight of the sandwich and fruit. She glanced up at the officer, as if asking for permission, and he nodded with a smile. "Go ahead," he said. "It's for you." She picked up the sandwich and took a small bite, her movements slow and careful. The officer watched her, his heart swelling with a mix of emotions. She was so young, so vulnerable. He couldn't imagine what she had been through, but he was determined to help her. As she ate, the officer continued to make calls, but no one had reported a missing child matching her description. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. This was going to be harder than he thought. Just then, the girl spoke up, her voice soft but clear. Do you think I'll ever find my family?" The officer turned to look at her, his expression softening. He didn't want to give her false hope, but he also didn't want to crush her spirit. "I don't know," he said honestly. "But I promise you this, I'm going to do everything I can to help you. You're not alone anymore, okay?" The girl nodded, but there was a sadness in her eyes that broke his heart. She finished her food in silence, and the officer sat with her, trying to think of what to do next. After a while, he decided to take her to the hospital for a checkup. She looked pale and thin, and he wanted to make sure she was okay. He explained this to her, and she nodded, though she seemed nervous. "Will it hurt?" she asked, her voice trembling. The officer shook his head. "No, sweetheart. They're just going to make sure you're healthy. I'll be right there with you, okay?" She nodded again, and he helped her to her feet. As they walked out to the car, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the air was still cold. The officer made sure she was warm and comfortable before starting the engine. On the way to the hospital, the girl sat quietly in the back seat, her eyes fixed on the passing scenery. The officer glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his mind filled with questions. Who was she? Where had she come from? And why had no one reported her missing? When they arrived at the hospital, the officer took her inside and explained the situation to the staff. They were kind and understanding, and they quickly took the girl to a room for her checkup. The officer waited outside, pacing the hallway as he tried to piece together the puzzle. After what felt like an eternity, a doctor came out to speak with him. "She's underweight and a bit dehydrated, but otherwise, she's healthy," the doctor said. "We'll keep her here overnight for observation, but she should be fine." The officer nodded, relieved. "Thank you," he said. "Did she say anything else? Anything that might help us figure out who she is?" The doctor shook his head. "No, she's been very quiet. But she did ask for you." The officer's heart swelled at this. He went into the room and found the girl lying in the bed, her small frame almost swallowed by the blankets. She looked up at him, her eyes wide and trusting. "Are you leaving?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The officer shook his head, pulling up a chair beside her bed. "No, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere. I'll stay right here with you, okay?" She nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. The officer reached out and took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to let her face it alone. The hospital room was quiet, save for the soft beeping of the machines and the occasional sound of footsteps in the hallway. The little girl lay in the bed, her eyes half closed as she drifted in and out of sleep. The officer sat beside her, his hand still holding hers. He didn't want to leave her, not even for a moment. She had been through so much, and he wanted her to feel safe. As he sat there, his mind raced with questions. Who was this little girl? Where had she come from? And why had no one reported her missing? He knew he needed to find answers, but he didn't know where to start. He decided to call his partner at the station to see if there had been any updates. "Hey," he said quietly into the phone, not wanting to wake the girl. "Any news?" His partner sighed on the other end. "Nothing yet. We've checked all the local shelters and foster homes, but no one's reported a missing child. It's like she just appeared out of nowhere." The officer frowned, his grip on the phone tightening. There has to be something. A child doesn't just end up on the streets without someone noticing. "I know," his partner said. "We're doing everything we can, but it's going to take time." The officer nodded, even though his partner couldn't see him. "Okay. Keep me updated." He hung up the phone and leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. He felt frustrated and helpless, but he knew he couldn't give up. He looked down at the girl, her small hand still in his. She was so young, so innocent. She deserved to know where she came from, to have a family who loved her. As he sat there, lost in thought, the girl stirred and opened her eyes. She looked up at him, her expression soft and trusting. "Are you still here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The officer smiled, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "Of course I am. I told you I wasn't going anywhere, remember?" She nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Thank you," she said softly. The officer's heart swelled at her words. He didn't know what he had done to earn her trust, but he was grateful for it. "You're welcome, sweetheart. How are you feeling?" She shrugged, her eyes drifting to the window. "Okay, I guess. I don't like hospitals, though." The officer nodded, understanding. "I don't blame you. They can be scary. But the doctors just want to make sure you're healthy, okay?" She nodded again, but she didn't say anything else. The officer sat with her in silence, his mind still racing with questions. He knew he needed to find out more about her, but he didn't want to push her too hard. She had already been through so much. After a while, he decided to try again. "Do you remember anything else about where you came from?" he asked gently. "Anything at all?" The girl hesitated, her brow furrowing as she thought. I remember a park," she said slowly. "There was a big tree, and a swing. I used to play there." The officer nodded, encouraging her to continue. "That's good. Do you remember where the park was?" She shook her head, her expression clouded with frustration. Drifted in and out of sleep. The officer sat beside her, his hand still holding hers. He didn't want to leave her, not even for a moment. She had been through so much, and he wanted her to feel safe. As he sat there, his mind raced with questions. Who was this little girl? Where had she come from? And why had no one reported her missing? He knew he needed to find answers, but he didn't know where to start. He decided to call his partner at the station to see if there had been any updates. "Hey," he said quietly into the phone, not wanting to wake the girl. "Any news?" His partner sighed on the other end. "Nothing yet. We've checked all the local shelters and foster homes, but no one's reported a missing child. It's like she just appeared out of nowhere." The officer frowned, his grip on the phone tightening. "There has to be something. A child doesn't just end up on the streets without someone noticing." "I know," his partner said. "We're doing everything we can, but it's going to take time." The officer nodded, even though his partner couldn't see him. "Okay. Keep me updated." He hung up the phone and leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. He felt frustrated and helpless, but he knew he couldn't give up. He looked down at the girl, her small hand still in his. She was so young, so innocent. She deserved to know where she came from, to have a family who loved her. As he sat there, lost in thought, the girl stirred and opened her eyes. She looked up at him, her expression soft and trusting. "Are you still here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The officer smiled, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "Of course I am. I told you I wasn't going anywhere, remember?" She nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Thank you," she said softly. The officer's heart swelled at her words. He didn't know what he had done to earn her trust, but he was grateful for it. "You're welcome, sweetheart. How are you feeling?" She shrugged, her eyes drifting to the window. "Okay, I guess. I don't like hospitals, though." The officer nodded, understanding. "I don't blame you. They can be scary. But the doctors just want to make sure you're healthy, okay?" She nodded again, but she didn't say anything else. The officer sat with her in silence, his mind still racing with questions. He knew he needed to find out more about her, but he didn't want to push her too hard. She had already been through so much. After a while, he decided to try again. "Do you remember anything else about where you came from?" he asked gently. "Anything at all?" The girl hesitated, her brow furrowing as she thought. I remember a park," she said slowly. "There was a big tree, and a swing. I used to play there." The officer nodded, encouraging her to continue. "That's good. Do you remember where the park was?" She shook her head, her expression clouded with frustration. "I don't know. It was far away, I think. We had to drive to get there." The officer made a mental note of this. It wasn't much, but it was something. Maybe if he could find the park, he could find out more about her. "What about your grandma?" he asked gently. "Do you remember where she lived?" The girl's eyes filled with tears, and she looked away. I don't know. It was a small house, I think. With a red door. But I don't remember where it was." The officer's heart ached at the sadness in her voice. He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle. "It's okay," he said. "You're doing great. Every little bit helps." She nodded, but she didn't say anything else. The officer sat with her in silence, his mind racing. He needed to find out more, but he didn't know how. Just then, a nurse came into the room, carrying a tray of food. "Here you go, sweetheart," she said, setting the tray down on the table beside the bed. "You must be hungry." The girl looked at the food, her eyes widening at the sight of the soup and crackers. She glanced up at the officer, as if asking for permission, and he nodded with a smile. "Go ahead," he said. "It's for you." She picked up the spoon and took a small bite of the soup, her movements slow and careful. The officer watched her, his heart swelling with a mix of emotions. She was so young, so vulnerable. He couldn't imagine what she had been through, but he was determined to help her. As she ate, the officer decided to try again. "Do you remember anything else about your grandma?" he asked gently. "Anything at all?" The girl hesitated, her spoon hovering over the bowl. She used to sing to me," she said softly. "A song about the stars. She said they would always watch over me." The officer nodded, his heart aching at the memory. "That's beautiful," he said. "Do you remember the song?" The girl nodded, her eyes filling with tears. She began to hum softly, the melody haunting and sweet. The officer listened, his heart breaking for her. She had lost so much, but she still held on to these small, precious memories. When she finished, the officer reached out and took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Thank you for sharing that with me," he said. "It's a beautiful song." She nodded, but she didn't say anything else. The officer sat with her in silence, his mind racing. He needed to find out more, but he didn't know how. Just then, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw a message from his partner. "We might have something. Call me." The officer's heart leapt with hope. He turned to the girl, his expression soft. "I need to make a quick call, okay? I'll be right back." She nodded, and he stepped out into the hallway, his heart pounding. He dialed his partner's number, his hands trembling with anticipation. "What's going on?" he asked as soon as his partner answered. "We got a hit," his partner said. "A woman called in saying she thinks the girl might be her niece. She's on her way to the station now." The officer's heart raced. This could be it. This could be the break they needed. "I'll be there as soon as I can," he said. "Keep me updated." He hung up the phone and took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. He didn't want to get his hopes up, but he couldn't help it. This could be the answer they had been looking for. He went back into the room and found the girl sitting up in bed, her eyes wide and curious. Is everything okay? She asked. The officer nodded, his expression soft. Everything's fine, sweetheart. I just need to go to the station for a little while. But I'll be back soon, okay? She nodded, but there was a flicker of fear in her eyes. The officer reached out and took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. I promise I'll come back, he said. You're not alone anymore, remember? She nodded again, and the officer gave her a reassuring smile before heading out the door. His heart was pounding as he drove to the station, his mind racing with possibilities. Could this woman really be the girl's aunt? And if so, what did that mean for her future? When he arrived at the station, he found his partner waiting for him. She's in the interview room, his partner said. She's pretty shaken up, but she seems genuine. The officer nodded, his heart racing. He took a deep breath and walked into the interview room, his eyes falling on the woman sitting at the table. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears. Thank you for coming, he said, his voice soft. Can you tell me what you know? The woman nodded, her hands trembling as she clasped them together. I think the girl might be my niece, she said, her voice breaking. Her name is Lily. She's been missing for over a year. The officer sat across from the woman, his heart pounding as he listened to her story. She looked to be in her late 30s, with kind eyes and a nervous energy that made her fidget with her hands as she spoke. Her voice trembled, but there was a sincerity in her words that made the officer believe she was telling the truth. Her name is Lily, the woman said, her eyes filling with tears. She's my sister's daughter. My sister, she passed away a little over a year ago. Lily was living with her grandmother after that, but then the grandmother got sick, and, she paused, taking a shaky breath. We lost track of her. We've been looking for her ever since. The officer's mind raced. This could be the break they needed, but he had to be sure. Can you describe her? He asked gently. What does she look like? The woman nodded, pulling out her phone. She scrolled through it for a moment before handing it to the officer. This is her, she said, her voice breaking. This is Lily. The officer looked at the photo on the screen. It was a picture of a little girl, her bright eyes and shy smile unmistakable. It was the same girl he had found wandering in the rain. His heart swelled with a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that they might finally have answers, and sadness for everything this little girl had been through. That's her, he said softly, handing the phone back to the woman. She's at the hospital right now. We found her wandering alone in the rain last night. The woman's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Oh, thank God, she whispered. We've been so worried. Is she okay? Can I see her? The officer nodded, his expression softening. She's okay. A bit underweight and dehydrated, but the doctors say she'll be fine. I'll take you to her, but I need to ask you a few more questions first. The woman nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. Of course. Anything. The officer leaned forward slightly, his tone gentle but firm. Can you tell me what happened after her grandmother got sick? How did she end up on the streets? The woman's face fell, and she looked down at her hands. It's complicated, she said slowly. After my sister passed away, Lily went to live with her grandmother. But the grandmother was older, and she had health problems. When she got sick, she couldn't take care of Lily anymore. She reached out to us, but, she paused, her voice trembling. We live in another state, and we were going through some financial difficulties at the time. We couldn't take her in right away. We thought the grandmother had made other arrangements, but then we lost contact with her. By the time we realized what had happened, Lily was gone. The officer's heart ached at the pain in her voice. He could see the guilt and regret etched on her face, and he knew she had been carrying this burden for a long time. Do you have any idea how she ended up on the streets? he asked gently. The woman shook her head, her tears falling faster now. No. We've been trying to find out, but we haven't been able to get any answers. We've been searching for her for over a year. We thought we might never see her again. The officer nodded, his mind racing. He needed to verify her story, but he could see the sincerity in her eyes. He decided to take her to the hospital to see the girl, but he would keep a close eye on their interaction to make sure everything was as it seemed. Okay, he said, standing up. Let's go see her. The woman nodded, quickly wiping her tears and standing up as well. She followed the officer out of the station and into his car, her hands trembling in her lap as they drove to the hospital. The officer could feel her anxiety, and he tried to reassure her. She's okay, he said gently. She's a strong little girl. She's been through a lot, but she's safe now. The woman nodded, but she didn't say anything. Whispered. I remember a lady who used to sing to me, but I can't remember her face. The woman's face fell, but she quickly composed herself, giving the girl a gentle smile. That's okay, sweetheart. We'll take it one step at a time. I'm just so glad we found you. The officer stepped forward, his tone gentle but firm. We'll need to verify a few things before we can move forward, he said. Do you have any documents or photos that can help confirm your relationship? The woman nodded, reaching into her bag and pulling out a small photo album. These are pictures of Lily with her mother and me, she said, handing the album to the officer. And here's her birth certificate. The officer took the album and the document, carefully examining them. The photos showed the girl, Lily, with a woman who looked strikingly similar to the aunt, as well as another woman who must have been her mother. The birth certificate matched the girl's approximate age and the details the aunt had provided. He looked up at the woman, his expression softening. This looks legitimate, he said. But we'll still need to go through the proper channels to confirm everything. It might take a little time. The woman nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. I know, she said. I just want to do whatever it takes to bring her home. The officer nodded, his heart swelling with a mix of emotions. He turned to the girl, crouching down so he was at her eye level. How are you feeling about all this? He asked gently. The girl hesitated, her eyes flickering between the officer and her aunt. I don't know, she said softly. I'm glad she found me, but I'm scared. The officer's heart ached at her words. He reached out and took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. It's okay to be scared, he said. This is a big change. But I promise you, we're all here to help you. You're not alone anymore. The girl nodded, her eyes filling with tears. She looked up at her aunt, her expression soft and trusting. Will you stay with me? She asked. The woman's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded, pulling the girl into another gentle hug. Of course, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere. The officer stood back, watching them with a mix of relief and sadness. He was glad the girl had found someone who cared for her, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing her. He had grown so attached to her in such a short time, and the thought of saying goodbye was harder than he had expected. After a while, the woman pulled back slightly, her hands still resting on the girl's shoulders. Lily, she said softly. There's something I need to tell you. The girl looked up at her, her eyes wide and curious. What is it? The woman took a deep breath, her expression filled with sadness. Your grandma, she passed away a few months ago. She loved you very much, and she wanted to make sure you were taken care of. That's why we've been looking for you. The girl's eyes filled with tears, and she looked down at her hands, her lower lip trembling. I didn't know, she whispered. The woman reached out and gently lifted the girl's chin, her eyes filled with love and compassion. It's okay, sweetheart. She's in a better place now, and she's watching over you. And I'm here now. I'm going to take care of you, okay? The girl nodded, her tears falling faster now. She looked up at the officer, her eyes filled with a mix of emotions. Will you still be here too? She asked softly. The officer's heart swelled at her words, and he nodded, giving her a reassuring smile. Of course I will, he said. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here to help you every step of the way. The girl nodded, her expression softening. She reached out and took the officer's hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. Thank you, she whispered. The officer's heart ached at her words, and he crouched down again, his eyes filled with emotion. You don't have to thank me, sweetheart, he said. I'm just glad I could help you. The girl nodded, but she didn't say anything else. She just sat there, her small hand still holding the officer's, her eyes filled with a mix of emotions. After a while, the officer stood up, his expression serious. We'll need to contact child services and get everything sorted out, he said. It might take a little time, but we'll make sure everything is done properly. The woman nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, she said. For everything. The officer nodded, his heart swelling with a mix of emotions. He didn't know what the future held for this little girl, but he knew one thing for sure, she was no longer alone. The next few days were a whirlwind of paperwork, phone calls, and meetings. The officer spent most of his time at the hospital, making sure the girl, Lily, was comfortable and safe while also coordinating with child services and the legal system to verify her aunt's story. It was a complicated process, but he was determined to see it through. Lily's aunt stayed by her side, her presence a constant source of comfort for the girl. She brought photos, told stories about Lily's mother, and sang the same lullabies Lily had faintly remembered. Slowly but surely, the girl began to open up, her trust in her aunt growing with each passing day. The officer watched their bond strengthen with a mix of relief and sadness. He was glad Lily had found someone who cared for her, but he couldn't ignore the ache in his chest every time he thought about saying goodbye. He had grown so attached to her in such a short time, and the thought of not being a part of her life anymore was harder than he had expected. One afternoon, as he sat with Lily in her hospital room, she looked up at him with those big, trusting eyes. Are you going to leave soon? She asked softly. The officer's heart ached at her question, and he shook his head, giving her a reassuring smile. Not yet, he said. I'm going to stay with you until everything is sorted out, okay? Lily nodded, but there was a flicker of fear in her eyes. What happens after that? She asked. The officer hesitated, not wanting to overwhelm her with too much information. Well, he said gently, if everything checks out, you'll go live with your aunt. She'll take care of you and make sure you're happy and safe. Lily looked down at her hands, her expression clouded with uncertainty. What if I don't want to go? She whispered. The officer's heart swelled at her words, and he reached out to take her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. I know this is scary, he said. But your aunt loves you, and she wants to give you a good life. And I'll still be here to check on you, okay? You're not going to lose me. Lily nodded, but she didn't say anything else. She just sat there, her small hand still holding the officer's, her eyes filled with a mix of emotions. Later that day, the officer met with a caseworker from Child Services to discuss the next steps. The caseworker, a kind but no-nonsense woman in her 40s, reviewed the documents and photos the aunt had provided. Everything seems to be in order, the caseworker said, looking up at the officer. But we'll need to do a home study to make sure the aunt's living situation is suitable for Lily. It's standard procedure. The officer nodded, his expression serious. How long will that take? A few days, maybe a week, the caseworker said. In the meantime, Lily will need to stay in foster care. We've already arranged for a temporary placement. The officer's heart sank at the thought of Lily being sent to live with strangers, even temporarily. He knew it was necessary, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was letting her down. "Is there any way she can stay with me until the home study is done?" he asked, the words coming out before he could stop them. The caseworker raised an eyebrow, surprised by his request. "You're not a licensed foster parent," she said. "It's not that simple." The officer nodded, his mind racing. "I know," he said. "But she trusts me, and I don't want her to feel like she's being passed around. I can take time off work, and I'll make sure she's safe and comfortable." The caseworker studied him for a moment, her expression softening. "You really care about her, don't you?" The officer nodded, his heart swelling with emotion. "I do," he said. "She's been through so much, and I just want to make sure she's okay." The caseworker sighed, her tone sympathetic. "I'll see what I can do," she said. "But it's not up to me. I'll have to run it by my supervisor." The officer nodded, his heart pounding with hope. "Thank you," he said. "I'll do whatever it takes." Later that evening, the officer sat with Lily in her hospital room, his mind still racing with thoughts of the caseworker's words. He didn't know if his request would be approved, but he knew he had to try. He couldn't bear the thought of Lily being sent to live with strangers, even for a short time. Lily looked up at him, her eyes wide and curious. "What's wrong?" she asked softly. The officer shook his head, giving her a reassuring smile. "Nothing's wrong," he said. "I'm just thinking about how we can make sure you're happy and safe." Lily nodded, but she didn't say anything else. She just sat there, her small hand still holding the officer's, her eyes filled with a mix of emotions. The next morning, the officer received a call from the caseworker. His heart raced as he answered the phone, his hands trembling with anticipation. "We've approved your request," the caseworker said, her tone matter-of-fact. "Lily can stay with you temporarily, but there are conditions. You'll need to attend a brief training session, and a caseworker will check in regularly to make sure everything is going smoothly." The officer's heart swelled with relief, and he nodded, his voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you," he said. "I'll make sure she's safe and comfortable." The caseworker's tone softened. "I know you will," she said. "It's clear how much you care about her." When the officer told Lily the news, her face lit up with a smile that made his heart swell. "Really?" she asked, her eyes wide with excitement. The officer nodded, giving her a reassuring smile. "Really," he said. "You're going to stay with me for a little while, okay?" Lily nodded, her expression softening. "Thank you," she whispered. The officer's heart ached at her words, and he reached out to take her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "You don't have to thank me, sweetheart," he said. "I'm just glad I can help." The officer's small apartment was quiet, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional sound of cars passing by outside. Lily sat on the couch, her legs tucked under her, as she looked around the room with wide, curious eyes. The officer watched her from the kitchen, his heart swelling with a mix of emotions. He had never imagined he'd be in this situation, but he was determined to make it work. "Do you like mac and cheese?" he asked, holding up a box of the instant kind. Lily nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Yes, please." The officer smiled back, feeling a sense of relief. He wasn't much of a cook, but he could handle mac and cheese. As he prepared the meal, he kept an eye on Lily, making sure she was comfortable. She seemed to be adjusting well, but he could still see the traces of fear and uncertainty in her eyes. When the food was ready, he brought it over to the couch and sat down beside her. "Here you go," he said, handing her a bowl. "Careful, it's hot." Lily nodded, blowing on the steaming pasta before taking a small bite. "It's good," she said softly. The officer smiled, his heart swelling with affection. "I'm glad you like it." They ate in silence for a while, the only sound the soft clinking of their forks against the bowls. The officer glanced at Lily occasionally, his mind racing with thoughts of how to make her feel more at home. He had never been responsible for a child before, and the weight of it was both overwhelming and humbling. After they finished eating, the officer cleared the dishes and sat back down beside Lily. "How are you feeling?" he asked gently. Lily shrugged, her eyes drifting to the window. "Okay, I guess. It's different." The officer nodded, understanding. "I know it's a big change," he said. "But I'm here for you, okay? Whatever you need, you can tell me." Lily nodded, but she didn't say anything else. She just sat there, her small hands clasped in her lap, her expression soft and thoughtful. The officer hesitated for a moment, then reached out and took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked. Lily looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mix of emotions. I don't know," she whispered. "I'm scared." The officer's heart ached at her words, and he nodded, his expression softening. "It's okay to be scared," he said. "This is a big change. But I promise you, we'll get through it together, okay?" Lily nodded, but there was still a flicker of fear in her eyes. The officer sat with her in silence, his mind racing with thoughts of how to help her feel more secure. Later that evening, after Lily had taken a bath and changed into the pajamas the officer had bought for her, they sat on the couch together, watching a cartoon on TV. Lily seemed to relax a little, her small body leaning against the officer's side as she watched the screen. The officer glanced down at her, his heart swelling with affection. She looked so small and vulnerable, and he felt a surge of protectiveness. He reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch soft and reassuring. "Do you like the show?" he asked gently. Lily nodded, her eyes still fixed on the screen. "It's funny," she said softly. The officer smiled, his heart swelling with relief. It was a small moment, but it felt like a step in the right direction. When it was time for bed, the officer tucked Lily into the makeshift bed he had set up for her in the spare room. He had done his best to make it cozy, with extra blankets and a stuffed bear he had picked up at the store. "Do you need anything else?" he asked, crouching down beside the bed. Lily shook her head, her eyes wide and trusting. "No, thank you," she whispered. The officer nodded, giving her a reassuring smile. "Okay. If you need anything, just call for me, okay? I'll be right in the next room." Lily nodded, but there was still a flicker of fear in her eyes. The officer hesitated for a moment, then reached out and took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "You're safe here, sweetheart," he said. "I'm not going to let anything happen to you." Lily nodded, her expression softening. "Thank you," she whispered. The officer's heart ached at her words, and he leaned down to press a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Good night, Lily," he said softly. "Good night," she whispered back. The officer stood up and turned off the light, leaving the door slightly ajar so she wouldn't feel alone. He went to his own room and sat down on the edge of the bed, his mind racing with thoughts of the day. He had never imagined he'd be in this situation, but he was determined to make it work. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to let Lily face it alone. The next few days passed in a blur of routines and small moments. The officer took time off work to be with Lily, and they spent their days exploring the city, playing games, and talking. Slowly but surely, Lily began to open up, her trust in the officer growing with each passing day. One afternoon, as they sat in the park eating ice cream, Lily looked up at the officer with those big, trusting eyes. "Do you think I'll ever see my aunt again?" she asked softly. The officer's heart ached at her question, and he nodded, giving her a reassuring smile. "Of course you will," he said. "She's working hard to make sure everything is ready for you. And when it is, you'll go live with her, and I'll still be here to check on you, okay?" Lily nodded, but there was still a flicker of fear in her eyes. "What if I don't want to go?" she whispered. The officer's heart swelled at her words, and he reached out to take her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "I know this is scary," he said. "But your aunt loves you, and she wants to give you a good life. And I'll still be here to check on you, okay? You're not going to lose me." Lily nodded, but she didn't say anything else. She just sat there, her small hand still holding the officer's, her eyes filled with a mix of emotions. Later that evening, as they sat on the couch watching TV, the officer's phone buzzed. He picked it up and saw a message from the caseworker. His heart raced as he read it. "The home study is complete. We've approved Lily's aunt for placement. We'll be moving forward with the transition." The officer's heart sank at the words, and he looked over at Lily, his mind racing. He didn't know how to tell her, but he knew he had to. He took a deep breath and turned to her, his expression soft. "Lily," he said gently. "There's something I need to tell you." The officer sat on the couch beside Lily, his heart heavy as he tried to find the right words. She looked up at him, her big eyes filled with curiosity and a hint of worry. He took a deep breath, his voice soft but steady. "Lily," he began, "your aunt has finished all the steps she needed to take. She's ready for you to come live with her." Lily's eyes widened, and for a moment, she didn't say anything. She just stared at him, her small hands clutching the edge of the blanket draped over her lap. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she asked, "When?" The officer hesitated, his heart aching at the fear in her voice. "In a couple of days," he said gently. "She's really excited to see you again and to take care of you." Lily looked down at her hands, her lower lip trembling. "Do I have to go?" she asked, her voice breaking. The officer's heart swelled with emotion, and he reached out to take her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "I know this is scary," he said. "But your aunt loves you so much, and she wants to give you a good life. She's been waiting for this for a long time." Tears filled Lily's eyes, and she shook her head. "But I don't want to leave you," she whispered. The officer felt a lump form in his throat, and he blinked back his own tears. He hadn't realized how much this moment would hurt. "I don't want you to leave either," he admitted. "But this is what's best for you. Your aunt is family, and she's going to take great care of you. And I'll still be here, okay? I'll visit you as much as I can." Lily looked up at him, her tears spilling over. "Promise?" she asked, her voice trembling. The officer nodded, his own eyes filling with tears. "I promise," he said. "You're not going to lose me, Lily. I'll always be here for you." She nodded, but she didn't say anything else. She just leaned into him, her small body trembling as she cried. The officer wrapped his arms around her, holding her close and letting her cry. He didn't know what else to say, so he just held her, his heart breaking for the little girl who had come to mean so much to him. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparations and quiet moments. The officer helped Lily pack her few belongings into a small suitcase, including the stuffed bear he had bought for her. They spent their time together doing the things she loved, playing games, watching cartoons, and taking walks in the park. But there was a heaviness in the air, a sense of impending goodbye that neither of them could ignore. On the morning of the transition, the officer woke up early and made Lily her favorite breakfast, pancakes with syrup and a side of fruit. She ate quietly, her eyes downcast, and he could tell she was trying to be brave. He sat with her, his heart aching as he watched her push the food around her plate. "Are you ready?" he asked gently when they had finished eating. Lily nodded, but there was a flicker of fear in her eyes. "Will you come with me?" she asked softly. The officer nodded, giving her a reassuring smile. "Of course I will," he said. "I'm not going to leave you until I know you're settled and happy." She nodded again, but she didn't say anything else. She just reached out and took his hand, holding it tightly as they walked out to the car. The drive to her aunt's house was quiet, save for the soft hum of the radio. Lily sat in the back seat, her small hands clutching the stuffed bear in her lap. The officer glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his heart swelling with a mix of emotions. He was happy for her. She was going to be with family, with someone who loved her and could give her a stable home. But he couldn't ignore the ache in his chest at the thought of saying goodbye. When they arrived at her aunt's house, the woman was waiting outside, her face lighting up as she saw the car pull into the driveway. She rushed over as the officer helped Lily out of the car, her eyes filled with tears. "Lily," she said, her voice breaking. "Oh, sweetheart, I've missed you so much." Lily hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward, allowing her aunt to pull her into a gentle hug. The officer stood back, watching them with a mix of relief and sadness. He could see the love in the woman's eyes, and he knew Lily would be okay. But it didn't make saying goodbye any easier. After a few moments, the aunt looked up at the officer, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she said. "For everything. I don't know how to thank you for taking care of her." The officer nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "She's a special kid," he said. "I'm just glad she's going to be with someone who loves her." The woman nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I promise I'll take good care of her," she said. The officer nodded again, then crouched down to Lily's level. "Hey," he said gently. "This is it, okay? You're going to be with your aunt now, and she's going to take great care of you." Lily's eyes filled with tears, and she threw her arms around his neck, holding him tightly. "I don't want to say goodbye," she whispered. The officer hugged her back, his own tears falling now. "It's not goodbye," he said. "It's just, see you later. I'll visit you soon, okay?" Lily nodded, but she didn't let go. The officer held her for a moment longer, then gently pulled back, brushing the tears from her cheeks. "You're going to be okay," he said. "You're strong, and you're loved. Never forget that, okay?" She nodded, her lower lip trembling. "I'll miss you," she whispered. The officer's heart ached at her words, and he gave her a gentle smile. "I'll miss you too, Lily. But I'll see you soon, okay?" She nodded again, and he stood up, giving her one last reassuring smile before stepping back. Her aunt took her hand, leading her into the house, and the officer stood there for a moment, watching them go. As he drove away, the officer felt a mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and a deep sense of gratitude. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure: Lily was going to be okay. She was loved, and she was safe, and that was all that mattered. And as he drove, he made a silent promise to himself: he would keep his word. He would visit her, he would check on her, and he would always be there for her. Because even though she wasn't his daughter, she had become a part of his heart, and that was something he would never forget.